Thank you for coming out today. I really appreciate it. I'm Laraine Herring. I'm 54. I'm almost 55. I entered menopause, which is when there's been a full year without a menstrual cycle, about 5 years ago. I have a mother who said menopause was not a problem and everything was awesome, and she didn't even notice. She also said the same thing about childbirth, so I feel like she's probably not the most reliable narrator about all things. But so some of the things I began to find out as I was entering it myself was that there was not language that seemed to honor where I was. Medical help was not great. The amount of doctors who wanted to give me antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds for things like rage were really fascinating. And this is not just from male doctors, but also from female doctors that I tried to speak to about, what I'm feeling, the changes that happened and I think I probably have had a pretty relatively easy transition. But the hot flashes, I haven't slept through the night since, I don't even know, 2015, 14 maybe. It's a good night if I get 6 hours of sleep in a row, and then get up to do all the things that you get up to do, and then you're like, well, other things, your skin, your hair, but really what struck me was the rage. And so during the pandemic, one of the things I did was I started an online magazine called Hags on Fire, because I wanted to hear stories from other women going through it, because I couldn't get any stories out of my mother, and I didn't know really where to go. And because in my heart I'm a writer, I'm always like, where do I go to learn about other people? I go to stories. Where do I go to see how other people have managed, a particular transition? I go to stories. So that was the purpose of founding that. And I've been really, really surprised. We're in our sixth year of that publication. And I didn't think anybody would submit. It was like, who's going to send me a story about menopause? And, people have been sending stuff from all over the country. And it's been a real honor to gain much more insight into what is not an abnormal stage of a woman's life, but a stage of a woman's life. Like, we're not broken. We don't need to return to being 20. We don't need to, do all the things that the majority of the marketing and the majority of the information about aging is about, trying to go back to a different time. And that seems to take a whole lot of energy that I really don't have, because I'm not sleeping through the night, right? So storytelling itself is an activity, not an object. So it's an involved process. It's an idea where we're really engaged with each other, with our environment, and with our particular readers or listeners. Stories are the closest we can come to shared experience. Like all stories, they are most fundamentally a chance to ride around inside another head and be reminded that being who we are and where we are and doing what we're doing is not the only possibility. So, Jenny. So it wasn't too hard to find photos when you Google old women that, I like Baba Yaga a lot in the middle. If you don't know the myth of Baba Yaga, that's worth looking into. So Jenny, next one. So when you think of these words, crone, hag, and witch, which are some of the more flattering terms, what are some of the connotations that come up for you? And there's paper and stuff at the table if you want to take a minute to jot any ideas down, but then I'm going to ask for people to contribute to the conversation, because stories. So what are some things that this brings up for you, that these words bring up for you? Jenny has a mic. Who's brave? Brave!
Well, to be dried up and isolated, and who would want to converse with you with where you're at?
Say unhappy or alone. You usually don't hear a story of a happy witch with her friends.
As if being alone is like the most awful thing, right?
Mean and scary. So I have a bunch because I relate to this really well.
Okay.
And especially in my tribe, it's being older is a sign of reverence and being wise, but and being very cool. It's like you've kind of got a groove going on and you're really settled with yourself and you're comfortable with a lot of things. You know things, you're powerful, but you're also scary and misunderstood and alone.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, Curtis.
I put teacher. It
Did
seems like
you? That's very,
often
very...
there's like a moral to, they're trying to teach somebody a lesson, trickery, trying to teach somebody typically younger of a lesson that they come back to in the end and they're like, ah, yes, I've learned a lesson through you. But often trickery, dark, magic, ulterior motives.
I feel like he sees me.
Everything that everybody else said too, but also unkempt, like not taking care of yourself, maybe.
So these were just some of the ones that came up for me. Ugly, evil, harpy, haggard, useless, demonic, invisible, angry, fury, threatening, barren, nag, and then of course old. Right. So next slide. So here's some different etymology. Crone comes from crown, indicating wisdom, emanating from the head. The male equivalent of crone is wizard, which of course does not have the connotations of crone. Hello, patriarchy. Hag comes from hagio, meaning holy, and also the term hedge rider, she who is between the worlds. And that's one I really, really connected with as well. And wit comes from, which comes from wit, meaning wise. So the ways that we speak about ourselves matters a lot, right? The ways that other people, we can't ever control what other people say, about us, but the ways that we have internalized aging stereotypes, especially, aging while female, will very much impact how you enter into the next phase of life. Next, please. So some basic, and Jenny's here, she can take over this part of the lecture. Stereotypes. So stereotypes, and most of them, I'm sure you know this, unconscious devices we use to rapidly assess our fellow human beings, often not based on observed or lived experience, but rather are absorbed uncritically from the external social world. Implicit bias is the unconscious process which automatically influences us to like or dislike certain groups of people. And then structural bias, these are the policies or practices of the institutions that we're a part of. And all of these work together to influence how we view ourselves as we age. So some of the things that's interesting about the aging, in particular the aging stereotype, and this comes from Dr. Becca Levy, the aging stereotypes are internalized beginning in childhood and continuing through the lifespan. So they operate, of course, like all stereotypes, they operate unconsciously. The more they become self-relevant, so it's funny maybe to make fun of elder people or to take on all of the, the kind of jokes and the pratfalls and all the stuff that happens when we're 12 and 15 and 20 and 30. And then as it becomes more of our lived experience, the power of the negative stereotypes increases because it's now becoming our lived experience. The way that we view the aging process and the way that we view ourselves as we age can directly impact our psychological, biological, and behavioral steps. And of course, and I'm no stranger to this as well, the fun and the amount of money and the, that it takes to stay young, right? If you've, ever walked through Sephora or walked through Ulta or walked through, all those stores, there's so much stuff. And makeup is super fun, and if you like it, I'm not saying anything about that in any way, or, it's just that this is a tremendous amount of money. So $49.2 billion in the US is generated by cosmetic sales. On average, Americans spend between $244 and $313 on cosmetics every month. The largest category of that is skincare, which of course includes anti-aging, all the anti-aging creams, serums, for the lines here, the chins, the at home, all of that kind of stuff. Skincare products make up 42% of that industry, but interestingly, yet completely predictably, during the pandemic, these numbers dropped by 8%. Guess what was happening? We were not out in the world as much being seen by other people. The pressure to look a particular way, to present in a particular way as a woman is of course incredibly strong. And if we get to just stay home and be like half dressed for Zoom, right? And then get the right ring light, and you're going to get the glasses on. You're like, I'm good. I haven't bathed in 7 days, but it's okay. I've gone wild and barren and feral. All the cool things that I'm really striving for, and that society wants me to be. So this is a question I always want to ask myself. So again, it isn't about not buying makeup or not buying cool things or all things that you might want to do, but who is it that's benefiting from where our dollars go? So who wins when we so money is a resource, and money is an energetic exchange of power. So when we're taking our money and giving it in exchange for X, who's winning? And that's just a question that's been really helpful for me when I'm trying to buy anything. Someone's going to benefit. They're getting money from me. And it's not like, you go to a therapist, you go to a yoga studio, you go to, you're exchanging money in exchange for something else. But I'm pretty sure it's a whole lot of men making a whole lot of money off my cosmetics purchases. So the World Health Organization lists aging as the most widespread and socially acceptable stereotype today. One way, if you kind of find yourself catching, hearing ageist thoughts about yourself or about other people, they're in there so deep for so many of us. If you can catch yourself and replace the age stereotype with one of the ones that we're more familiar with, race, gender, sexuality, you can really see right away just kind of how ingrained and how horrible the way that we're talking about a particular group of people is, right? But it can be hard to notice when it's been habituated. So unlike some of these, the more common stereotypes, or not the more common, but the more, the stereotypes that we've gotten more language about, race, gender, sexuality, et cetera, we really encounter these stereotypes long before they're part of our lives. So if you're part of a group, a marginalized group, because of your race or because of your sexual orientation or because of your religion, from the very beginning you're part of that group. So the first time you encounter that stereotype, you're like, oh, that's me, and you're little. As we age, we know we're going to get there one day, right? I mean, like those of you who are teachers in the room, and you realize when your students can't remember or can't recognize, the 1990s, because now they were born in 2002 or whatever, right? You realize how old you are and how old and kind of ancient they're seeing your past. Because for all of us, the world begins when we showed up in it. Right? I mean, that's normal. The world's like, hello, here I am. Time moves from here, from me, forward, so it's difficult. So certainly age beliefs vary from culture to culture, and I appreciate your share about your tribe and the ways that you were, that were more positive about viewing age. This is still from Becca Levy's work. From one of her classes at Yale, she asked people to write down what they believed about older people. And a 72-year-old United States woman wrote down senile, slow, sick, and grumpy. So she was 72. Contrasted with an 82-year-old woman in China who wrote wise, loves Peking opera, kind, reads to grandchildren, walks a lot. So, I mean, age is just a construct. It's like gender. It's just a construct. It's just, but we've become acculturated to what's accepted or what's dominant in our particular culture about it. And those belief patterns can really adversely impact what we do with the final third of our lives. So specifically, this next question, what were you told growing up, or what have you come to understand about what it means to age as a woman? And this is just a little bit different from the naming exercise. So what were some of the first messages that you got? Oh, yeah.
Well, I was told that if I don't marry, I'd become a bag lady, and I didn't marry. And but I was lucky that I had a 107-year-old grandmother who told me, Janny, let the last check bounce. So, and I just, that gave me a whole totally different
Yep.
quality on aging, because she was so smart and business-wise, and at 105, we gave her a calculator so she could look at the stock market. So I've been lucky to think very differently about aging.
What a great gift, right? Because you had someone to model a different way.
Yeah, because I've noticed it with people younger than me, I'm 72, that are just already saying they're old and they can't do things, and they're stopping and they're sitting on their couch.
Nicole?
I've started by making a list of things I thought I remembered my mom and stuff, telling me about, maybe a grandma or a great grandma. But then I just I zoomed out and looked, and I realized all the stuff that I was told about aging as a woman all involved physical things, negative physical things. So I was able to just kind of lump those in. I don't think I've ever been told about cognitive changes or anything like that. It was all physical.
For me, after 20, my value went down every decade.
I think that there was always just such a focus on womanhood being childbearing and child rearing, that when that stage of a person's life was over, they just become invisible.
Right.
Kind of put out to pasture.
Exactly. Exactly. Our usefulness is gone.
Kind of piggybacks on what she was saying, that your importance in your family just decreases over time in this culture.
And it's,
And
yeah.
that probably none of my 4 kids will take me in. I'll probably end up in a home somewhere someday. I mean, that was my vision of what being an old lady would be like, because statistically I would outlive my spouse.
Right. Right. Anybody else? Yeah.
I just remember being asked a lot, you did that alone? You do
Right.
that alone?
Right.
Or just even when you go and sit in a restaurant, only one? Just one? All of this, you would go to a movie alone? You'd travel alone?
Right.
It's a huge
Right.
stereotype.
Right. The stigma of that, the stigma of the woman who dares to go out alone, to travel. Well, it wasn't legal for, I mean, in our lifetime it has been, of course, but I'm just in the middle of reading a novel. It takes place in the turn of the last century, so 1902 or 3. And although it wasn't technically against the law for an unaccompanied woman to be out after the sun went down, right? Then there was the whole connotation about what that meant. Women couldn't own property. Women couldn't, handle, their own bank accounts, their own money. Even my mom, she couldn't get a credit card in her own name until the mid-70s. She was married, so the credit cards had to be in my father's name.
I always seem to see it as the older you get, the more stigmatized it is to be an individual. Your acceptability is what you continue to give to others. Like if you don't have a family, or if you don't care for children and your husband, you're not like having any power,
Right.
or people are not interested in you.
Yeah. So part of the purpose of this question is the first way to begin to combat the ways we talk to ourselves is to realize what we're saying. So that's what I wanted to first kind of start with excavating. I don't have any children. I never wanted to have any children. So that's been one of the, just about being female, that has been one of the challenges in terms of, being always asked, being always, when you find the right person, when you do, like all this stuff, it's like my whole entire being is defined by that, by that single act. And then I didn't get married till 2 years ago. So there was also, kind of that, and we frankly got married because of insurance. Because America. I like him, but we got married because of insurance. So this is also from Dr. Levy's work. So the first thing we just did was awareness, identifying where the negative and positive images of aging are in our society, because those are what's going to be living inside of our heads. Recognizing where we might blame. So one of the things that that stereotypes can tend to do is to blame that person who is the subject of that stereotype for whatever is going on in their lives that is negative. Right? So aging is normal. It's not something we did wrong. It's something that we're really fortunate to be able to do. You know, when I think about how lucky I am to have my own money, to own my own property, to be able to travel freely, to be able to go out alone as a woman, it's like this is very new in our culture, you know, in world, you know, history, and I feel like this is just amazing, and it should have always been, but it's not, and I want to really, you know, help other people, you know, move more into that, because it's an incredible power. Then finally see the challenge, so being able to take some action against ageism so it's not harmful. The first step for that is to not have it harm you. So before we can go out and try to help or try to address other people, we have to clear out the belief systems that are in ourselves around this. And I don't know that you're ever like not gonna, you know, ever be completely free of the voices or free of the things, right? Because, you know, we come from a lot, but we can notice, stop, pause, be like, oh, I'm saying that, that's funny. Like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever said, and how long have I been saying that to myself, right? But before you bring it to the surface, it just happens. And then it dictates not only behavior, but I think it was what you were sharing about people being willing to, you know, to take a trip, to go out and engage in the world, they've decided they're old, right? And so that I'm old, therefore I cannot do A, B, C, D, E. And it's an unchallenged assumption, but it creates behavior in the external world, right? So this is just one example of changing language. The word elder versus elderly, and the connotations that are connected to each of those two words. And to me, that's really dramatic, that difference. To be considered an elder is like, oh yeah, now I will ride through the night on my broom with my cat and you will pay attention to me. You know, elderly, on the other hand, now I got my cane and I got this bedraggled cat and I'm the bag lady and I'm all the things that are going along with that. But you're gonna, Jenny, look for Jenny.
Got a little story about what happened to me after I moved here recently. And I got lost. I was out hiking, you know, I think I'd gone 10 miles. I'd run out of water. I didn't know how to use all trails. And I came, thank goodness, I came into a group of men doing, clearing the forest for clear cut for fire safety. And I said, I need help getting back. I am lost, and I wonder if you can help me. And I heard the guy on his walkie-talkie to the thing. He said, I've got an elderly lady here who's lost, and I've got to take her home. I've got to take her home. And I was like, that's the first time I'd been called elderly. And then it took like 25 minutes to drive home. I mean, I'd really walked a long way. And I started laughing about it, and I thought of a T-shirt idea that could make me a millionaire.
There you go.
I said, I'm new at being elderly.
What's kind of funny, though, is that he called you an elderly woman, but you hiked 10 badass miles, right? Like... Right. So another thing that I thought was interesting as I was considering this next piece is the idea of where our support system is as we move into menopause and beyond. So, you know, one of the big things that's happening in menopause is our hormones are going insane and then going away. Right? When we move into, you know, through puberty, our hormones are all like, oh, hello, I am here. I would like to mate with everything. I am doing all of the things and my skin is popping out and everything is exciting. And everyone is around to be like, yeah. Your teachers are supportive, your parents are supportive, your family is there, your friends are there. You're starting your life. And there's all kinds of support there for that. But then you get to be a productive worker, in very big air quotes. So you get to do that for the vast part of your life. And then now you're like, okay, well, who's going to take care of, like, again, no kids. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get eaten by my cat. Like, I'm going to just fall over one day and they're just going to, and it'll be great. And y'all will say, well, she said it. So you're like, I think she mentioned that. So what I've noticed is I need to take much more conscious effort to find support for this next piece, because it's not built into the culture. You can retire and maybe you'll get a cake or a pie or a please don't ever come back again or whatever when but then that's it, right, from that. And then, if you don't, if you're living alone, and my husband and I actually live separately, we live down the street from each other, highly recommend. And so where do you find, groups of friends? Where do you find community? Where do you find, and it doesn't have to be all people your age, right? I mean, like that's, the wider ranges that can group together, the more the stereotypes will diminish through exposure, right? So if we're all isolated in our 55 and over communities, and we never see the young folk, right? I mean, it really is still one of my favorite things about teaching is, like, who are you, Generation Z? Like, wow, what do you have to say? What's your language? What's your, and that is still interesting to me because it's very different from me, and it helps, to take on the Grammy role on purpose. It helps to be, in contact with younger people. So kind of think for yourselves, where is the support? Where can you garner that support for what's coming next? Ursula Le Guin, she's dead, but she was an amazing, amazing author if you have not read her work. In menopause, women must be willing to become pregnant with themselves at last. It's one of my favorite quotes from her, of many. So it's an opportunity. Again, if we get here, women die in childbirth. Women die, you get to, it's a lot, it's a long slog to get to be in this next space. So who are we? Who are we absent the roles of mother or wife or worker, or what do I really want? What's really going to bring me joy? What's going to bring me fulfillment? What do I want to let go of? What's not part of this next space? So Sharon Blackie, she is a Jungian psychologist and a mythologist and folklorist, and she lives in Wales. And she's got a new book out called HAGITUDE. And her website, she's got actually a year-long program about how to consciously move into a postmenopausal life. So if you can't read this, it says, her definition of HAGITUDE: actively embracing menopause and all that comes after, which has the potential to be the most intensely lived, joyous, creative period of our lives. Comfort with the unique power we embody, a strong sense of who we are and what we have to offer the world, and a firm belief in our necessary place in the ever-shifting web of life. Now, in the United States, we have to kind of do a lot of that work ourselves to believe that we matter. They're being pushed back constantly. I just found a new book this morning, so it's not on my final slide, which has some of the reference books that I used, but it's just called Hags, and it's focused on middle age, on the invisibility of middle age. And it starts off with, the author, embrace this idea of, well, when I reach this point, I'm going to become invisible. But what I realized when I got there was, wait, when I look in the mirror, I'm still here. Like I didn't go away. What is happening is I am being ignored, which is a very different reframe. I am invisible. You are not seeing me. And that's another way to reframe, like with elder and elderly, to take back some of that power. So menopause, psychologically, it's a pause between our cycles and stories of a life. There are all kinds of physical changes, as we all know, and they're different for every woman, which makes it even more hard to have a conversation, especially with a doctor. Some of the most common ones, of course, hot flashes, acne, dryness, irritability, trouble sleeping, anger, rage, the hormonal changes, that kind of thing. But as one of you said earlier, the United States focuses so much more on what the losses of menopause are, and then Hello, capitalism provides all the goods necessary to deal with those losses. Of course, they don't, because they're gone. But we've spent lots of money trying to. But what if we viewed not through the lens of what we've lost? We're always losing things. We lose cells every day. We're always losing things. So what if rather than looking through the lens of what we lost, look at what we're gaining? So I wanted us to think about this next phase in terms of a need for a ritual or a new story toward entering into this phase. So what if aging were framed as a rich period of life that we're moving toward, right, rather than only what we're letting go of? But of course, when we are changing in any way, so one of the definitions of grief is the normal and natural emotional response to a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So it isn't just about a death or a large trauma, it's about change. And menopause is certainly a time of a whole lot of change. And it's important to honor those changes and to grieve them and to let them go with love, with gratitude, the things that our bodies have done for us. It's really amazing, right? We're all still here, we're breathing, we're not trying to breathe, we're just breathing. Whatever is going on in there is still going on in there. We're not saying, please digest the breakfast that I had. It's just happening. We've survived illnesses. We've survived some serious things. We've perhaps survived, other kinds of traumas. And still we're here like this frame that is certainly getting wrinkled. Things are not in the positions that they were when I was 20. The way my skin feels is different. The way my hair feels is different. But it's all still here. And as far as I know, this is the only way that I can continue to be a part of the planet. So it would be super awesome to find ways to continue to love all of this and to embody all of this completely. Because every time or every piece of energy that I spend wishing it were different or younger or thinner or faster or stronger is energy that I can't use to build joy, to do the things that I enjoy doing, to find new friends, to find support systems, to create things, to write things, to draw things, to do all of that, because all of us only have a finite amount of energy. It's not infinite. So if you think of it like a pie, where is it all going? That's all you have. And if it's all going toward what I wish were different, that doesn't leave very much for what could be. Another amazing author, Leslie Marmon Silko. That's not a picture of her, but Leslie Marmon Silko. If you don't allow the ceremonies to grow, you kill them. That's from her book, Ceremony. So this is about, to me, in terms of this talk, this is about how do we create rituals, how do we create new stories for the next period of our lives that evolve, that aren't fixed. Everything is constantly changing. If we have a story like, so I primarily teach Psych 101, and we're in the middle of looking at future self papers and problem solution papers, and trying to help them envision what could happen tomorrow and craft a conscious path to get there it's a very challenging thought process. Humans are not great at future thinking. We're not great at being able to imagine what might come next because it's always being filtered through the lens of what has been. And that's one of the other insidious powers of stereotypes, because what has been and what we believe still now filtering, laying the groundwork for what I'm going to be even able to do, to dream, to try to do next. So before you can consciously craft a new story about aging, you really have to be honest about what you feel about it. And so that was part of those earlier questions, like, what do you feel? I was sure, I would like my knees back from my 20s. I had better knees. I slept better. There's things, that were easier to manage when I was younger. But to pretend like that doesn't exist doesn't help. I need to get real on what I've internalized about aging, what I've internalized about my value to myself, to my family, to my community as I get older. So we've looked at these questions. What do you consciously believe about women aging? What might be unconsciously lurking beneath the surface? So I hope as you kind of go through your day or week, you might have some more thoughts that pop up about, oh, I kind of think that. Or when you see someone in the grocery store, or you see someone at Walmart, or wherever you go, and, is there something that jumps to your mind first about that person? Is there a judgment that pops up that you can go, oh, wow, okay, interesting? Not to look at that from a lens of shame or self-judgment, but just like, oh, it's interesting, that's in there. Okay, so let's clear that out if it's not useful. Go ahead, next slide, please. Another aspect, another thing to consider is identity. And we all, of course, embody many different identities throughout our lives. So if you can consider the identities that you connected with in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and I just picked 40s as a general cutoff between, when people often begin to enter perimenopause, going into menopause and postmenopause, which identities still fit? So, maybe when we were in our late teens, early 20s, maybe a lot of us were college students, and that was one of our primary identities, and that was the way that we related to ourselves, to our families, and to the world. Which identities no longer fit? And of course, the real easy metaphor here is clothes. Which clothes, and it's not about size, but about style, or about what fit you at one point in your life that no longer fits you, that no longer represents how you would like to present yourself moving forward. And then, of course, identities, it's not like I'm this and now I'm not this. So for those of you who are mothers, you're always going to be a mother. But the way in which motherhood is impacting your life at one age is going to be different in another age. So how do you redefine that as you continue to be mother, or as you continue to be, of course, we're all daughters, even if our parents are dead, we're still daughters. So, how does that change? How does that move? Except Thatcher, son, sorry. Mike. So this is the good old future thinking. What can you imagine for yourself later in life? If you absolutely cannot imagine it, you will not get there. You have to be able to see it. So for me, it's always been like, it's living the dream. To live with a bunch of cats, to have a deck. I have a deck in a tiny house with a bunch of cats. I have a husband who's not there half the time. It's the dream. So this was absolutely, not saying it's your dream, this is my dream, this is fantastic. I'm able to write, I'm able to do the artwork that I like to do, I'm able to read, I'm able to, all the kinds of things that I want to do. I want to travel more when I retire. There's things I want to do, do more volunteer work in the community that I can't do while I'm working full time. And I'm starting to think about, what do I want to bring in? Because I'm not interested, like you say, to sit on the couch for the next 30 years of my life, because I'm hoping I get 30 more. That's not interesting to me. So then next step, what would it take to cultivate them? So keeping in mind that, again, we have a finite amount of energy and we only have 100%. So if we're going to bring something in, something else has to go. It's like your closet. And I can't say everything, that something always goes when something comes in, but then it gets too big and then it explodes, right? So when something comes in, I want to bring this identity, this experience in, what is it time to let go of? What is it time to graciously let go of? Examine the fears that you have about aging, and which ones are inferences, so which ones are you just concluding are going to happen versus what is actually happening. It's easy to take an inference or an assumption and turn it into a fact in our heads. And it's not actually happening. And these two, I think, are really big and important questions. What's changing that you can control, and what's changing that you cannot control? Your body's going to do what your body's going to do. Doesn't mean you can't exercise it, doesn't mean you can't feed it good food, it doesn't mean all the things, but it's going to do what it's going to do. So trying to turn it 20, that's out of my control. Understanding what's within your control and what's outside of your control helps you make decisions from a place of power. Another writer, Cheryl Strayed, wrote the book Wild, that maybe many of you have read or at least seen the movie. It is impossible for you to go on as you were before, so you must go on as you have never been. So this is from the book Wild. So she was hiking the Pacific Coast Trail, which is not on my list of things to do when I retire, shockingly. But I think it applies really well to aging as well, right? You have to imagine something different. And so this is a prompt that you might want to do on your own time. So if you could imagine 0 barriers. So your health is great, your finances are like you need, your mobility is good, your schedules, whatever it is that are currently maybe some limitations or some fears that you have, what would you create for yourself? And then other questions to go along with that. Who is with you on this journey? Who's there? What are you doing? What are you curious about? Because being able to remain engaged and curious about the world is amazing. I will never learn all the things about the world. The world is just fascinating. It's just, I mean, where would you live, right? Where would you live? Where would you be? So this is just one version of a possible map for a vision quest, moving from where you currently are through menopause into postmenopause. So over here, so where have you been? Who have you been? What have you desired? What have you released? Who supported you? What do you want to take with you? And then as you cross the bridge into the next phase, where are you going? Who will you become? What do you desire? What will you release? Who will support you? What will you gather close? So these are obviously much longer journaling or thinking questions than we have time for in the workshop, but I wanted to provide just an example of how you can start to think about what you want to build for yourself. What kind of life do you want? What kind of community do you want? What sort of experiences do you want to have? And then this is Joyce Sullivan. She's a poet that I'm really in love with. And this poem reads, "Nothing my friends tell me shocks me anymore. No wild dream or unadvisable plan or moonshot idea. Recently, my friend told me she wants to move to Wyoming to be closer to horses. She tells me horses can hear your heartbeat 4 feet away. That's enough for me right there. Another friend is relocating to Peru, another to Alaska in search of his true north. Another is adopting a child. Another is turning down a killer job so she can finish the book she's been trying to write for years. Another is leaving the man of her dreams for a woman. Look, America is awful and the earth is too hot, and the truth of the matter is we're all up against the clock. It makes everything simple and urgent. There's only time to turn toward what you truly love. There's only time to leap." And if you're on Instagram, she posts a lot of these poems on her Instagram account, and I think it's Joy Sullivan Poet is the handle for that. And so these are some of the sources that I used for the talk. So that's Sharon Blackie's book, Hagitude, Reimagining the Second Half of Life. Ashton Applewhite, This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. Becca Levy, Breaking the Age Code, How Your Beliefs About Aging Determine How Long and Well You Live. And then What Fresh Hell Is This? And the What Fresh Hell Is This is more biological. It goes into a lot of really amazing information about the physical changes to your body that your doctor probably didn't know. I mean, it was a really, really interesting read. So this one's more mythological. That one's just pure on rage and awesomeness. This one's more psychological and looking at stereotypes, belief patterns, and a lot of cognitive behavioral work in there. And then the biological option over there. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or ideas? Thatcher. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
You should have known
Can't hear
that.
me, right? Just thinking about what you said about elder and elderly, I love that, and try and practice that. And a different culturally, this is very, our culture, America's United States centric. Have you found other cultures that do aging better? I mean, they all do it. There's different ways to do it. What do they have to inform our culture and different ways of seeing aging?
Yeah, I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't want to misrepresent cultures that I'm not immersed in. The Japanese culture has a long tradition of reverence for not only the elderly but ancestors, which I think that's a whole other talk. But that's Does anyone have anything to add to the cultural question? I really want to be careful about not stepping on cultures, is why I'm punting this question. So she said Mexico. I really think everybody does it better than we do too. Yeah, I think we're really, really bad at it. We have a very, very narrow window of what's beautiful. And for men too, but it's harder for women. This is a different experience for women. Men get to be still distinguished and handsome, and they're not turned down for jobs, and all of they've still got a place they can move in the world in a way that women struggle more with. And maybe that's changing some. I hope this is the last job I ever have to apply for. So maybe that's not something that I'm gonna, experience. But it's easy to look at that and be like, But you can be dapper, Thatcher. You get to be dapper. I get to be dowdy, and you get to be dapper. Uh-oh, the sociologist is gonna talk.
So I have observed anecdotally that one area where men do have a similar amount of angst is with their hair, right? Not all heads look great bald.
That is true.
And I have watched my husband just embrace it and shave it all, and some of his friends, fighting every last hair, and then so I empathize on that area. But what I was still stuck on are the stereotypes, because I teach sociology, and so we talk about stereotypes all the time. And it just occurred to me from listening to you talk that I'll ask my students after we've talked a lot about how groups are stereotyped and how that's hurtful, and then I'll turn around and say, who are the bad drivers in our community, driving cars? And they will yell out, even when I have non-traditional college students in the classroom, all the students will yell out, old people. Right?
Right.
They would never say black people or Jewish people. They would. They know better.
Right.
But every semester they will just, without hesitation, they're all bad drivers. And so now I need to approach that differently and talk about how that stereotype is just as hurtful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's obviously just as prevalent. And
you're right. It's so socially acceptable to.
Right. They're slow, they're in line taking too long, they're writing a check. Anything else? Yeah.
My mother had a croning ceremony when she was about 67 or 8, something like that. And her church, they would do croning ceremonies at age 60. Nice. And I was kind of thinking that it should be something that you could pick anytime from the time you're 55 to 95 or 105. It was really beautiful. It was an acknowledgement of her ending one portion of her life and going into another, and everything we're talking about. And it was just hugely supportive by lots and lots of people in her church community.
Yeah.
And I don't see that we have any respectful thing that's common for that.
Right.
So, but I'm looking forward, I've been thinking about mine for a few years now. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out.
We can build them. I think we have to build them, because for women, it's marriage and childbirth are the times that we get ritual, and the ritual for childbirth is the baby shower and all of the stuff that happens with that, and then the wedding. That's what we get. And so if you don't do either of those either, which I didn't, it's like, okay, I'm here, and ritual is a society's way of honoring you. It's an important part of being in a community. They're saying, hey, we recognize you and what you're bringing to us, and it's valuable.
I think you can say without talking about specific cultures that that's something that other cultures do better than the United States. Is ritualizing.
Yes.
So like liminal spaces between or transitions are always really anxiety producing for human beings.
Right.
And so there are a lot of cultures that do a better job of ritualizing those, right? Creating community around them, which is something that eases that anxiety. And we are really bad at that. And we're bad at it with puberty too, in fact. We may have more support then just because we live in a family, but
Yeah.
culturally, we tend to not recognize these as important transitions.
And I think there is more of, like your first period ceremonies or rituals or things like that, that some families and groups are doing. And I don't remember any talk about that at all when so that was in the early 70s when I was growing up. But it could have been going on, I don't know. But that's but it's not cultural wide, right? I mean, it's still like a shameful, sort of a thing.